gentle night, come loving black-browed night, give me my Romeo. And when he shall die, take him and cut him out in stars, and he will make your face up and run so fast that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish stars.
Romeo! Romeo! Oh, I have bought the mansion of love, but not possessed it, and though I am sold, not yet enjoyed. Hunting in little
Give me my Romeo! Give me my
Hello, and welcome to When Music Meets Mindfulness. I'm your host, Vanya Chan. Today's episode features a very special guest, Lawrence Cherney, the founding artistic director of Soundstreams. For an introduction, I will borrow from your bio on the company's website. Lawrence's first professional engagement as oboist was under the baton of Igor Stravinsky with the CBC Symphony Orchestra. He then embarked on a career as an oboe soloist of international distinction, commissioning more than 150 works for oboe and recording and touring these works on 3 continents. Lawrence founded Soundstreams in 1982 and has been at the forefront of Canadian music, often referred to as Canada's ambassador of new music. Soundstreams produces an eclectic annual series in Toronto featuring new music and music theater and opera, and has become one of the leading organizations of its kind in the world. So Lawrence, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today on the series. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I want to say it's a pleasure for me to be able to speak with you today.
Yes, thank you so much. I do want to take a moment to thank you for taking a chance on me when I was a young singer years ago. My first production with Soundstreams was Airline Icarus by Brian Current and Anton Piatigorsky. So I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that I've had since then to collaborate with you and the company. I feel like I've learned a great deal and grown a lot as musicians.
My goodness, we did that in 2014.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so 11 years. Yeah.
11 years, yes,
And
but it
you've
was...
and you've traveled with us to the UK, to Germany, and you're working with us later this year
Yes.
in Toronto, and also again when we go to the Dublin New Music Festival in April,
Yes.
and Chicoutimi in
Yes,
May.
yes. So excited. It's so wonderful. Yeah. So lots to look forward to. Great. So with that, let's start with our first topic, which is calming the mind. And so today's world, we run on distraction and information overload, and it can be overwhelming if we don't find ways to turn off the noise and to calm our minds. What are some activities and strategies that you utilize to help calm your mind, heighten awareness, and bring your focus to the present moment? So this could be taking a walk outside, meditation, listening to music, or even a crossword puzzle. Could you share some methods?
I can think of at least one and probably more.
Okay.
I have the most wonderful 8-year-old collie, a rough-haired collie. He is my third collie. Well over 25 years ago, my daughter, who was at that time 10 years old, wanted to have a dog. And I thought about this, and having grown up being told that I was allergic to dogs by my mother, which I think was not true. I think she just didn't want a dog. I thought to myself, if we were to get a dog, and all I could see in my mind was the lassie, the famous lassie of the Walt Disney movies. Anyway, in the first year I thought, oh, what have I done? Because I hadn't realized that the dog would be my dog once my daughter went back to school. Okay, and towards the end of the first year, we were, of course, taking walks and longer walks. And after about 18 months, I thought, how could I have managed all these years without a dog? So anyway, I know that many people, of course, have pets. All I can say is that when I go out with my dog on walks, speaking of calm, in a way, what happens is that I enter into his world. And it's not that his world is so simple compared to mine, but it's really different. He's very much in the moment. And whether it's enjoying a trail out in a forest, or whether even in a city park, either way, I relax and connect with, people and things and just the environment around us in a way that's really different from my ordinary life. And even in the bitter, bitter cold of winter, but first maybe in the late in the evening when it's time for a dog walk, maybe I'm not sure I want to go out, but 30 seconds into the walk, I'm so glad I did. So maybe that's my favorite way of changing, in a sense, my connection to the world. And I'd say my dog, whose name is Jonah. Jonah is quite famous. I mean, pretty much around the city, everybody knows Jonah. I'm the guy with the dog. I'm the guy with the beautiful collie.
Oh, that's wonderful. Jonah, that's a great name. I love that. Let's move on to our second topic, which is organizing our thoughts. And so I borrowed a little bit from your website. Soundstreams is known as a global leader in the presentation of innovative, carefully curated, and immersive musical experiences. As the founding artistic director of Soundstreams, you are committed to showcasing the works of Canadian and global composers and musicians with a focus on bringing contemporary conversations to our communities. Soundstreams also serves a broad community of music lovers through your accessible outreach and education programs, including TD Encounters, RBC Bridges, and the New Voices Curator Mentorship Program. So obviously, Soundstreams has a long and storied history, and I'm aware there are many example projects to choose from. But could you highlight a couple of projects, perhaps one from past programming and maybe one more current project that you feel exemplify Soundstream's current mission and values?
Maybe I could speak a little bit about, we just opened our 43rd season on this past Saturday night, November the 22nd, at Trinity St. Paul's. And it was a concert that featured both musicians and a choir. The program was called Mass for the Endangered. And Mass for the Endangered is an oratorio by an American composer, Sarah Kirkland Snyder. And this again is a piece for a chamber ensemble and a chamber choir. And when she was commissioned to write this work, it's not a mass in the sense of a Catholic mass, although it does borrow some phrases, and of course it has the typical 6-movement form of a mass, but it also incorporates poetry from a living American poet named Nathaniel Bellows. Anyway, it's quite wonderful because while it does acknowledge that we have done a pretty bad job of taking care of our planet, it is, and I should say in the arts too, we care about climate justice and social justice, but it's not always easy for us to know what can we do on the stage that around that theme, because what we do not want to do is preach to people about what they should or shouldn't do. On the other hand, this work is quite extraordinary in that way, because it does speak to what we have lost in terms of our environment. And of course, it's not only plants, animals, we're all endangered today. So it's talk about timely this piece is, but it's also about hope and about how with passion and care and commitment, and perhaps most importantly, awareness, there are still things that we can do. And so we were very pleased to be able to do this work. And it was combined on the first half with other works that spoke to some aspect of the natural world. For example, in the first half, there were 3 works by the wonderful late great French composer Olivier Messiaen. He wrote a whole series of works called Catalogue des Oiseaux. He was a birder. He spent a lot of his time listening to birds in the 13 different regions of France, and he wrote a whole series of the most fantastic piano pieces that in some way or other captured the essence of many, many different birds. No 2 of those pieces are the same. Also in the first half there was some choral music, including a beautiful short choral piece by Andrew Balfour, who was a Cree composer based in Winnipeg, and Andrew wrote something called Gaze Upon Trees with a text by Duke Redbird. So again, different perspectives, indigenous perspectives from a French composer on our natural environment, what it means also to us, because we're in the music field. So birds, of course, are an important part of our world, our sound world, and the fact that we've lost some of our sound world is quite disturbing. But again, it's a program that hoped to raise awareness. I should say too, we partnered in this with an organization called FLAP Canada, and their purpose on earth as a non-profit, as an NGO, is to try to do what they can to save birds. We all know that birds collide with man-made structures, buildings, windows, tall office buildings, and it turns out there are many things that we can do to try and prevent that, to try and make or retrofit buildings, or certainly build new ones, or even do simple things to the glass in our houses to make it possible for birds not to collide and be lost to the world. So it was very rewarding for us to be able also to raise awareness about a particular aspect of our environment. There's a lot of grief and fear and emotions that are difficult to deal with in the world, and of course in most of us at one time or another are quite concerned, I think it's fair to say, about what's happening on our earth. And great music, we can't save the world, but what we can do is give expression to those emotions. And again, that isn't a cure, but it is, you were speaking earlier about calming the mind. In some way, sometimes art can help us to come to terms with grief, and in some way coming to terms with this sometimes empowers us and enables us to take that and do something positive with it. So I think in a way that's one of the things, one of the amazing things that the arts can provide to our society. It isn't only about the joys, it's also about the other side, all the challenges and the things that we have to worry about and must worry about.
The arts, music, especially for us as musicians, is that conduit. It expresses, but it also in some ways can help soften in some ways the message. It doesn't make it any less impactful, but the way that it's packaged in an artistic interpretation through our voices, through our instruments, it delivers the message in a way that can be soothing and calming and healing in a lot of ways. So it's important. I think we need to send that message that the arts needs to stay. It needs to be here, it needs to stay, and it needs to be a form of communication that we continue to nurture and just share.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone. One phrase that I like, and you may have heard this before, is what we can do in the arts sometimes is speak about the unspeakable. And whether it's climate justice or some of the the terrible things that do go on in our world, we need to find a way to come to terms with those things that's different from watching it on the news, or in a sense the way we absorb information in our daily lives. And again, the arts they can't make terrible things better. On the other hand, the arts can help us come to terms with those things, and in coming to terms with those things, sometimes it does enable us to take action, which is really wonderful when that happens.
So we're moving right along into our final topic, which is the state of flow. And we've sort of touched on it a little bit already in parts of our conversation. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has described the state of flow as the optimal state of inner experience in which there is order in consciousness. This happens when psychic energy or attention is invested in realistic goals and when skills match the opportunities for action. So for performers, it can be experienced as a state in which the mind-body connection has been finely tuned to the point that performance seems effortless, spontaneous, and is enjoyable. So you've toured internationally as an oboe soloist, and you've performed and recorded commissioned works for your instrument. Could you share an experience of flow, a performance moment where you felt a sense of ease, effortlessness, and joy in creating music?
What I can say, again, I'll give you an example, not necessarily from my own experience. I'm not saying I'd never have experienced what you've described as a performer, but I've often find it easier to sometimes say what I've observed in other performers. And again, just an example that's quite recent. I mentioned, because it's quite recent, this opening event of ours this past Saturday night that featured some of the piano pieces from Catalogue des Oiseaux of Olivier Messiaen, and the pianist who performed those pieces is a great pianist who came to us from Montreal, lives in Montreal. It's Louise Bessette, who is quite well known internationally for being a wonderful pianist, but also particularly for some of the works of Messiaen. She happens to have had the good fortune, and I guess also to be old enough to have studied with Yvon Loriot. Yvon Loriot was the wife of Olivier Messiaen. She may at one time have been a student of his. She was a fantastic pianist, and of course he wrote many, many piano works for her. Where I was going with this is that when Louise performs, you have one has a sense of calm, and meanwhile these pieces of Messiaen, they alternate between what he does in these works, by the way, you or some of the listeners may know, there are literally echoes of bird songs, different birds in all of the pieces, and you don't have to be a birder to recognize that that's what he's capturing. But at the same time, there's a different soundscape going on at the same time. Birds don't exist in a world by themselves. There's a context. They're in a city, they're in a forest, and so always in his works he has this contrasting to the high-pitched sounds maybe of birds up in the stratosphere. There's these much lower pitched sounds. It could be the sound of a forest, or it could be the sound of the ocean, whatever it might be. Anyway, in watching and listening to Louise play, I have this sense of total calm, total serenity, at the same time as she's playing a million notes, all correctly, all in the right place. But there's a certain, I liked your word serenity. There's, no matter how frenetic or how calm the music actually is, there's a serenity to what she's doing that that enables again, as a performer, you'll understand this. The last thing you ever want an audience to be thinking is, boy, is that ever hard. What one wants and hopes for is that in a way it seems impossibly easy, and that's a deceptive term, because what does it mean to be easy? It means that this sense of calmness and serenity is being transmitted by the performer to the audience, and I think it's, in a way, it's that kind of serenity that allows the audience to absorb it to the maximum.
When a performer can communicate with that ease, and you're not sitting in the audience feeling the nerves or hoping things go well. The main thing is everything is fine, everything is wonderful, and we're here to share something beautiful and important. That's the best. I think that's the best way to spend our time, to be together and to just flow with the music, which is why I think the word is flow. It's just very apropos to that feeling of connectedness and ease, that serenity.
Yeah, and if I could say, just you touched on something else which I thought was quite wonderful. This, yes, of course, it's an individual thing to be sitting in the audience, but there's also something quite important about experiencing it together. And I think just in the sense that sometimes bad news attracts attention, good news does too. And the sense of an audience that is at ease, that has been put into that place of calmness by a great performer. There's nothing better than sharing that with other people. You don't have to talk about it. Of course, you don't want to while a performance is going on, but I think we're wired to experience things in this way, and when it happens, it's so magical.
There's also that sense of flow that is derived from investing time and energy into inspiring projects. Your admiration of Claude Vivier and his music comes through in Soundstream's stage production of Musik für das Ende, and in the upcoming concert program, I Want to Tell You Everything, an anthology of love songs. So, could you expound on the inspirational connection that you have with Claude Vivier and his music, and also share your thoughts on the creative journey you've experienced producing and crafting these programs?
Claude defies being categorized. He he lived a short life. The simple truth is that he was murdered at the age of 34. Um, he was murdered by a serial killer who had murdered two gay men before murdering Claude. Claude was a person who could only create, in a sense, when he was in danger. And he did live, by his own admission, and those and his friends all agreed that he lived a pretty dangerous life. Meanwhile, Claude, he spent his whole life, in a sense, looking for identity. He was an orphan. Um, he was brought up initially by the brothers in Montreal, it being a very Catholic city. Discovered music, and in a way, music saved his life. But on the other hand, I think he spent his short years looking for who he was, and in that search, it was he invented musical languages. He invented actual language. When I say invented, his works often have languages that you think you know, but you don't, because they aren't any one language. He loved the sound of words, and also many of his works like Zapangu and Shiraz. Of course, some of them are names of real places, but he also created these imaginary soundscapes, imaginary landscapes, imaginary countries that never really existed, but they existed in his mind. He was a combination, really, of the most profound, subjects. I mean, it has been said that death, sex, and eternity preoccupied Claude Vivier. And if you wanted to have three important themes, does it get better than that? And I think all of his work, in a way, not to be cute, comes down to explorations, and sometimes they're zany, but underneath it all, there's always this search for something that matters, and particularly this search for eternity. And there are ways in which he probably came close, in a sense, living in danger the way he did. I think that was his way of touching eternity. And it's been said that he went places, even during his life, that nobody ever goes, and brought something of eternity back to us. I think, in a way, underneath, everything that he wrote, one senses that search. There you are. And of course, some of the themes are quite universal. So what's wonderful about programming Vivier is that he's not the only one to think that death, sex, and eternity mattered. So they're putting programs together like the one called "I Want to Tell You Everything." There, of course, Claude's own work called Love Songs is on that show, but the door is open to exploring that theme with all kinds of other possibilities.
From your perspective, as you were seeing these elements come together with music in particular, but also with love songs, and now with this new program coming in, sort of what sort of is inspiring for you to see when you see musicians coming together and performing and learning his music? Is there something that you respond to, that you particularly sort of hooked into?
I think I would say that in a way it's like a lot of good music. What is the most rewarding really is to come back to works, and because when you come back to, well, this group of songs called Love Songs, or when we did a second production of Music for Descenda, which is a staged work of Vivier, when these works, because they're good music, and it's true of all good music, there's no time when one feels that somehow this is the definitive interpretation. They're all good music, whether it's old or new, no matter what period it's written in, every time it's performed, it's literally being born again. And for me, that's the most interesting thing, is when you come back to a work. And that's why touring is rather important in a country like Canada, where we lack critical mass. And what's great about critical mass is it probably, in countries that have much bigger populations, it's easier perhaps to get more performances. What's important in more performances, you have a chance to, an interpretation never stays the same. A year later, 2 years later, the performers may be the same, but they're not the same as they were 2 years ago. It's going to be a different audience. Many things change every time a work is performed, whether it's a work that's 1,000 years old or it's a week old. So for me, that's the turn on, is what also inspired by whatever it was we did before, or sometimes it's what others have done. You know this as a performer. Every time a piece is done, even though we ourselves weren't necessarily in the audience or on the stage, somehow I think that even if it's a piece by Schubert, every time it's done, somehow it's building on, it's connecting to the hundreds of performances that there might have already been of that piece. It's never sort of an isolated thing. It's an organism that lives every time in relation to what was before and the present and even into the future. That's what I find really exciting about good music that's well played.
Lawrence, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the series and to share your expertise, your unique musical experiences and perspective and stories. And I'm very excited to be a part of I Want to Tell You Everything, an anthology of love songs. So I look forward to seeing you in person very soon. And
it's been great being with you. Thank you.
yes, thank you for the time. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. See you next time on When Music Meets Mindfulness.
Twist
Der Vogel ist ich die Sonne du und ich der Vogel